Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. I'm Ramon Mejia here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and, of course, author interviews. And this week I have 7 new LitRPG reviews just for you folks at home. Um, Beginning with A Game with No Rules, Perimeter Defense, book number 4. Then on to The Syndicate's Lair, Crusade, book 2. Oh, I forgot pictures. Crusade, book 2. Then the Sicilian Defense, Epic LitRPG Adventure, Fayroll, book 5. And then The Builder's Pride, The Legendary Builders, book 3. And then Desert Runner, Puatera Online, book 1. And Nova Sky, Titan Rising, and finally Shadow of the Rogue, a little RPG fantasy adventure Hearts book number 1. There are a couple more Liberty novels that I was supposed to get through last week that I mentioned, including the Black Dragon fantasy Liberty novel, which is Dragon Kings of the New World Book 2. Basically, that's the one with Dante Doom, the author who was created as a fictional personality by the publishers. I think I talked about it a couple weeks ago. I basically decided not to read it. It's not an interesting story to me, and it was kind of put off by that whole incident of a fictional author with a background created specifically for the Liberty community as a creation of the publisher. So it made it less appealing to me, and basically, I don't want to read it. And I mean, look, I genuinely don't have time to read every single novel that comes out, and this week my time was cut short because I'm a couple weeks behind on the novel I'm writing myself. So I had to make scheduling choices basically, and this one kind of just got cut. So there it is. But again, it is out there for you to read if you like the series. Yay for you. Okay. Also, the other one is the Dead Fortress Little PT Epic. This is Rule of Samar Book 3. Now, I generally am disappointed that I wasn't able to get to this week. I like book 1 and 2 in the series. I skimmed the novel just to make sure it's still LitRPG. It has already established a reputation as being an actual LitRPG novel, so I don't really have any worries there. I simply just ran out of time to read it. There are good reviews for it, so go check it out if you like that series already. Okay, but we are going to begin with LitRPG news for our next section. Okay, in Lit RPG news, we have a couple of stories, one of which I almost consider not actually doing. The first one is going to be about trademarks. I know this is a story that came up this week as a recurring thing from something else that happened a while ago. Trademark troubles. About a year ago, October 2016 to be exact, Alaron Kong filed for trademark rights to the term lit RPG. Now, this was actually in 2 parts. One is for apparel and wearable stuff, so things like T-shirts and stuff, which makes sense. Alaron sells lit RPG merch on his website, litrpg.com. Now, the second portion of that trademark is what got people concerned. It concerns movie rights, novel stuff, anything online, things like that. I mean, and so that was something that caused concern initially when people found out that he had filed for a trademark. At that point in October of 2016, Alaron addressed it. He said the reasons why he filed for it, and it kind of seemed like the filing was abandoned eventually, and it kind of simmered down. But at that point, time and place, people were very upset. There were lots of questions and concerns and fears that were legitimate, and that has kind of come back recently. I'll do the timeline of what events with the trademark occurred though. So October 2016 is the initial filing. In August of 2017, I should say, there is a notice of abandonment that was sent to the lawyers who handled the trademark originally. And in September of 2017 rather, the trademark was refiled by those attorneys that handled it initially. And this is when people more recently found about the refiling. All those same fears and concerns came back. Um, and there were absolutely legitimate fears and concerns and some outrage as well. All those feelings are totally legitimate. I'm not going to say that they're not, even if I personally don't share those same feelings. There were questions about, does this trademark mean that I can't write LitRPG? Like authors were legitimately scared for their source of income. because there are a few of us now who do this full time and who make our living as a lit RPG author. And so there were concerns like whether or not this was going to restrict people from the community, whether or not Alorand was going to basically say, "Oh, you can be lit RPG authors, you can't," and picking winners and losers. Um, there are other concerns from the community of readers. Questions were not, "Oh, is the genre now dead?" Because I have to ask someone for permission to use this term. And I personally, just in preparing this podcast, it was sad for me to notice that some authors have actually already started removing references to their book titles and descriptions for lit RPG. So there are already some people out in the world who are right now saying, I don't want to take the risk of a cease and desist letter or being sued by somebody in the future for using this term. And that to me is probably the saddest um, part of the story. And that even though the trademark hasn't been officially given to anybody, it's still in the application process. The refiling occurred. So that's still going on. Nobody actually has it. Um, that people are ready, just kind of saying, rather than take the risk later on for a potentiality, they're changing things now, and that's going to make it harder for those stories to be found on things like Amazon searches, or people to see basically this is meant for the literature community. So that to me is already sad. And so I asked Alaron to make to make a statement to address the concerns of the community, because I was seeing it in chat rooms and in Facebook pages and in Reddit pages about people just bearing torches, angry already, or just in fear, having questions that weren't being answered. And so Alorman actually made two statements. Now, the first was a video that basically said that there are a lot of huge problems in the world, and that people should focus on those problems instead of the drama with the trademark thing. And he encouraged people to donate to those causes. And while that video message, I can appreciate the sentiment of that video message, and that there were bigger things in the world, which is absolutely true. Um, that video message did not actually address the questions people had about the refile trademark issue, and he wrote a second statement. So I'm going to read that to you verbatim. I cut out like a little bit in the beginning, just saying this is for people who have questions about it. So I'll read it to you. Then this is what he wrote. A year ago, I did file for the copyright. There were two main reasons why I did. Back in the day, as silly as it sounds, there was constant friction and strife between the various LitRPG authors and companies. There was drama, lies, verbal attacks, fake accounts being made to start flame wars, basically everything you saw today on a larger scale. SMH. The number of reason I filed was so that no one would ever grab LitRPG name and force me and other authors to not write in the genre. I have, I had rather, and have no intention of doing that to others. One, it would be a seriously dick move, and two, it wouldn't work. Lol. Anyone who understands anything about how law would tell you it would be damn near impossible to enforce it. Also, it would just be a bonehead move that would piss people off. Also, I'm sorry, despite the fact that those points are obvious to me, though, I know for a fact that other authors or publishing companies had that very idea. So I took steps to protect myself and, by extension, the genre, which is a focal point of my life. I love LitRPG. It saved me in some very real ways, but I digress. The second reason I did it is that I'm a businessman. I see the potential in LitRPG, and if a movie is ever made, I'd like to be a voice in that room. A copyright might have, probably wouldn't have, but might have helped that happen. So I figured, why not? Now, as for refiling, I honestly had no idea it was happening till this morning. Apparently, the lawyer I hired a year ago to do it refiled. When I called to ask this morning, she said a refile was part of the service I paid for. Never occurred to me that a lawyer would do more work than when I wasn't pestering her. Lol. So there you go, folks. That is the full statement. Well, that's the statement from Alarm Kong about that particular issue of the refiling of the trademark. Um, I'm not going to speak on his behalf. Those were his words, and hopefully, it's something that reassures people that those are his intentions. Those are the reasons he did it. So they're going. Now, as for my 2 cents on this situation, um, some people don't. believe him because with great power comes the potential to abuse that power and authority. So I get that particular viewpoint. I don't share it though. Uh, I've interviewed Al probably 5, 6 times for 2, 3 hours at a time. I've even met with him personally after DragonCon recently. Had conversations with him in person, went over his house, had dinner with some other people in the community, and so it's just so hard for me to imagine that he ever had any bad intentions by doing this, or whatever do anything negative. Um, in full disclosure, I consider myself Elrond's friend, so you take my sentiments and my words with a grain of salt. Um, Personally, if I were the one holding this situation, I'd probably just personally drop the trademark application because it's a big trouble at this point, and it's literally causing divisions within the community, and it's just more problems than it's saving potentially. That's me personally. I think it would be a much better show that this isn't a concern by just dropping the trademark application entirely. But whatever the case happens in the future, folks, I'll be sure to keep you up to date and post to any and talk about any changes that occur within this particular situation. But moving on to some happier and some more or not interesting, but more cheerful little RPG news. We're going to move on to our next story, which is for Devlers LLC. Blaze Corvin's new book in the series, book 3, is coming out on October the 15th ish, depending on when editing gets finished. But he did release a new rap video to promote the upcoming release of Delvers LLC Adventure Capital. Again, so here it is. I'll play a little bit for you. I can't play all of it because YouTube will tag me as copyright infringement.
Blaze Corvin is back. Delvers LLC Adventure Capital.
A journey to mince, you know it's getting dangerous. Monsters, bandits, criminals, mages. Henry and Jason are now separated. Dolos do the same prick, they be hating. God and Wilbur of LitRPG to bring adventure. Delvers LLC, yeah, life's on the line, so what will it be? Adventure Capital, it's time for part 3.
Traveling to Minsk, the capital of Berber. Will Henry and Jason avoid getting murdered? Enemies are out there, powerful as ever. Loot is getting hot and I ain't talking about the weather. No. Devils LLC got the team and we on the way out to the capital. And these monsters don't wanna play. It's a death or die, they wanna take their life away. Adventure Capital, will they live to see another day?
Journey to mince, you know it's getting dangerous. Monsters, bandits, criminals, mages.
Okay, so there's your little sneak peek. You can check out the full video. It's really not that long. It's a couple minutes. We'll have a link in the show notes for the YouTube page. We're going to do Blaze Corvin's YouTube page for that actual video. So there you go. So that's kind of it for LitRPG news, though. And I move on to some stories that came out this week. Haven't had a chance to review them or read them yet, but hopefully we'll be able to get to them by the next episode of the podcast. This includes Frag number 5. Frag 5, a literary short story series by Zacharias Shakolis. He also put out the collection of short stories. He did with books 1 through 4, and he's also done with the books 1 through 5 as a collection. So if you want to invest in that, I know the individual are like 99 cents, but you might save a little bit if you get the larger collection. Also out now is, I'm not sure how to say this word, Erethia online. So that's out now. Also, Trehe Adventures, Book 1, A Literary Story, and Quest into Hidden Realms Literary Series, Book 1. There you go. So those are out now as well. Also, Justin Miller's World Keeper, Birth of a World is out as an audiobook. So that's always nice. I actually enjoy that particular novel myself. I look forward to maybe catching it on as an audiobook as well, but it's a nice literary story. So there you go. On to upcoming Lit RPG stories. These are, again, a list of stories that are coming out in the next couple months. I'm going to read them off. You feel free to skip ahead, but there are, again, a few new additions to the list that you might want to look forward to. Again, Devers LLC, Book 3, out October the 15th. Harmon's Cooper, Fantasy Online, Pollyanna, out October the 16th. The Wizard, Daniel Core Book 1, out October the 16th. Dante Doom's Book 3, The Iron Dragon, October the 20th. The Nemesis, the Pangardia Online Saga Book 1 out October the 23rd. Pantheon Move, that's Amarillo Book 10, is out on October the 24th this month. Remember that was pushed back from earlier for editing issues. Awaken Online Retribution, that's the side story in Awaken Online out October the 31st. Then into November, Redeemer of the Dead, which is the sequel to the other series and novel in that series. Um, the System Apocalypse out on November the 1st. Then we have, this is a new edition, also out on November the 1st, the Greystone Chronicles Book 1, IO Online. I thought when I read it initially, it said like 10, but it's IO, as in like the Jupiter's moon. So there you go. By Dave Wilmarth. Okay. Also out on November the 6th is Underworld, The Level Up or Die. On November the 8th, it is Desert Born, Puatera Online Book 2, which is the second book of the. I'm reviewing the first book in that series today. On November the 16th, Shattered Lands Book 3, Demon Wars. Out on November the 17th, rather. It is The Airship, a futuristic dungeon core, the Laboratory Book 2 from Skylar Grad. Reviewed his first book last week, I believe. I enjoyed it. I'm happy to see that he actually is going to put out a second book. Amarillo Book 11 will be coming out in November sometime. In December, while the Twilight Obelisk, Mirror Book 4, and December the 29th, right before the end of the year, Fayroll Mancer. There we go. Okay, on to new releases and reviews. Okay, in new releases and reviews, these are the reviews, folks. We'll begin with A Game with No World, Perimeter Defense, Book 4, written by Michael Atamanoff. So there you go. Nice Russian author. Apparently, this is the last book in this series, though, so I wouldn't expect more, unless for some reason they come out. But as far as I'm aware, this is it. Okay, this is 310 pages, $5.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Sorry, not available on Kindle Unlimited. That's a really big difference. Most of the stuff from these publishers don't end up on Kindle Unlimited for whatever reasons. So there we go. I'll read you the author's description. The Empire is splitting at the seams. The great houses refuse to obey the Throne World and have begun to conduct increasingly independent politics. Sensing the weakness of the central government, even the most loyal star systems in the Imperial Core are refusing to take orders from above. Is this just a string of coincidences or a coordinated campaign? Can a disjointed humanity rally around a strong leader to deflect an alien invasion? Who of the many figures in the intergalactic politics can rise to this challenge? And is there a basis to the creeping rumors that some influential aristocrats have joined forces with the enemy and allied with the aliens? This book will be the last in the series and will give the readers the answers to all of their questions, including the most important of all, what is perimeter defense? And that's totally true. By the end of the story, you actually know what this whole thing's been about, and it's a very nice twist at the end. But I'll get to that in a second. Okay, full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased the book when it came out, so that is what it is. And to be honest, I kind of have mixed feelings about the story. One, I'm happy to see like a real conclusion. I thought it was a very good, nice ending. But overall, in most of the story, there's a lot of political intrigue, which is not my cup of tea, and that's just me and my taste. Um, the game mechanics of the story are still very limited to informational notices about actions of the various houses and the empire and reputation shifts. And a lot of people don't actually consider this series lit RPG at all, just because of the limited scope of those mechanics, even though there are throughout the series. And I can appreciate that. This is probably the one series that I'm really just like right on the border of like, is this lit RPG or isn't? And I just happen to fall on the side that okay, I guess it qualifies, and it's already the end of the series, so why make an issue out of it for me? To be honest, um, but if you don't, that's cool. It is still a very good space opera story. Um, there are some very small action scenes in the beginning of the story, but they're very limited, and you don't actually get your first space battle until about 23% into the story, which to me is a big like I'm a big action guy. I like action stories, I like action adventure fighting. I'm cool with other things, but those are the qualities I'm drawn to in the stories that I read. and that I like a lot. So, this is definitely the least action oriented novel in the series. Yet the last 10% of the novel, to me, is worth the price of admission. I genuinely, even if I had known coming into this novel that most of it was political intrigue stuff, then I'm like, not my thing. That last percent of it, 10% of it is legitimately, I'm like, whoa, that's a lot of those were a lot of twists, and that's a lot of cool things that happen. And if you're a fan of the series, you'll probably enjoy it. I'm not going to spoil what happens because that's kind of a jerk thing. But I say everything that happened wasn't unexpected, and it changes the way you kind of look at the series in a way, in a good way, I should say. If you like political intrigue in your space hopper, this is totally for you. I mean, there's a lot of cool things that happen, and there were good reviews just say everything they expected. And so if you've been reading this series, nothing that happens in book 4 as far as like political true self should be a surprise. That's always been a theme within the series. But if you're looking for like the big space battles that you saw in like books 1 and 2, this isn't it. There are some. I'm not saying there's not, but there's not nearly as many, and they're not as there aren't as many of them, I should say. However, if you're just a fan of the series and you kind of want to see what's happening at the end of it, you might just want to consider purchasing and reading the last 10% of it. I think you'll walk away kind of happy. At least that's my opinion. For me, it's a score of 7 out of 10. I had a good time. So there you go. Okay, on to our next one, Syndicate Slayer, Crystal Crusade Book 2, written by Mars Dorian. Here we go. This is 310 pages, $2.99, available on Kindle Unlimited, and it's about 310 pages. As of this recording, there's no actual page number, but I'm guessing that's what it's going to be about. Here is the author's description. Dashiell is a rising star of the Crystal Crusade, the most popular virtual reality RPG in the world. But to get sponsorship, he has to compete with gritty players from around the world. His plan? Embark on dangerous and epic quests to boost viewership numbers. Dashiell and his co-players travel to a monster-infested island where they confront a mysterious race that hates humans. Even worse, the arch-nemesis schemes a twisted plan. During his fight for survival, Dashiell learns new skills, battles unique bosses, and even allies with his worst enemies. The pressure explodes when the real world turns as dystopian as the mysterious land of the Crystal Crusade. Okay. Also, full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I again purchased the novel when it came out. And overall, this is actually a really enjoyable sequel for the Crystal Crusade. It has the same game action with the addition, of course, new powers, new foes, new things like that, new skill trees, whatever. And additionally, you get to see the world from the perspective of the Syndicate, of the Sunblood Syndicate, rather. Those are the bad guys from book 1. And I actually like the fact that you kind of get to see an alternative perspective than just, oh, this is what the good guys say, and this is how they view the world, and how, what's good and bad. Genuinely enjoyed the fact that you got to see, uh, for all intents and purposes, the villain's perspective on the series, or on the novel. It gave you a new appreciation of that. What's good and bad in life is really culturally relative. What's good to one person is bad to another, or the way you see the world, and that definitely came across here. So I enjoy that. I also enjoyed learning about this perspective and the real life consequences that it had for the main character, Dashiell, or Boltzmann. That's his game name. Game name, I should say. The real life storylines in the series have actually been really good. I really enjoyed the one from book 1, which was a heart wrenching storyline about forced gaming addiction rehab, which almost had me, like, at some points, frustrated and angry at the villain so much that I wanted to throw my phone across the room, which is always a good sign because that means you're invested in the story. And book 2 also has a different storyline, real storyline, but it is interesting in its own way. It explores what it means to be an internet celebrity, like a YouTube star. And it made the real life portions of the story very interesting. And it incorporates some of the things that happen in the game, influencing the main character Dash's burgeoning pro gaming career. I won't spoil it for you, but there's some very interesting discussions in here about morality in video games. And I thought there were very good points made on both sides. But I can definitely see that this is a thread that's going to be coming up in book 3, like, a lot more. So really good real life storylines in this novel as well. Overall, had a good time reading the story. The in-game storyline doesn't really get like really good until like 20% mark. So there's a little bit of like setup and maybe a little filler, I guess, up until that point for the game for like the game storyline. But still, very entertaining read, and the addition of a good real world storyline, it only adds to that perspective. So I give it a score of 7 out of 10. Now, next story. The Sicilian Defense, Epic LitRPG Adventure Fayroll Book 5. This is written by A. Vasiliev. The Sicilian Defense is the fifth book in the Epic Fayroll series. Um, this is 359 pages. It is $6.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited either. So again, same thing from Russia, translated. Doesn't always make it to the Kindle Unlimited store, unfortunately. Okay, I'll read you the author's description, and then we can get into the actual review. Sicilian Defense is the fifth book of the Epic Fayroll series. With each chapter, we approach the solution of many of the secrets with which the main character Hain faces in the game and in life. Why is he being hunted? How do players know about his secret quests and deeds? And in reality, Harrington does not have the time to solve all these new problems. As a new, attractive, and flirtatious journalist, this is a really long intro. Forget it. I'm just going to read basically my intro. In the game, the main character Hagen has his own quest to bring back the gods. So that's, if you've read the other books, this should not be surprised. And in the real world, the basic storyline is that there's drama with the newspaper. That as the newspaper is expanding, he's getting new employees, so there's going to be like some interpersonal relationship issues. And so those are the kind of two big storylines. Plus, in the real world, there is an introduction to of a rival company or faction to his omnipotent bosses, essentially. And so those are the kind of the two storylines there. The first 18% of the novel sort of feels out of place because this is a different twist, I should say, for the story, because a lot of times in the other books, it was a slight real world storyline, and then into the game, get to that line. And the first 18% of this novel, basically almost a fifth of it, is entirely real world storyline dealing with the newspaper, and again, the drama of hiring new employees, and also that other rivalry issue, which is kind of a significant portion, and that's reflected in some other reviews for the novel. Now, in the game, again, that in-game storyline of bringing back the gods is not resolved. And I mean, not really at all, to be honest. There's almost no real progress made there, unfortunately. And a lot of that in-game portion of the story feels either like just random quests to get loot, or like quests that are tangentially related to that main plot line. But doesn't actually feel like there's a lot of advancement of that storyline, which is fine. But there's also criticism of a lot of this novel feeling like filler or as a setup for what's going to happen in the next book. And I think to some degree that's a legitimate criticism. Unfortunately, additionally, there's no real end to this novel. There's an end, obviously. There's run out of pages eventually, but it just kind of just ends. Like it's the main character is setting something up in the game. I'm not going to spoil it. Um, but before it actually happens, the story just says, "Bam, the end." Like it's like dot dot dot, or to be continued in the next book. And so that cliffhanger is also going to be kind of annoying. So for me, this is not my favorite novel in the series. It's not like bad or anything. Everything in game is still sort of interesting. It's just that you don't really feel like there's a lot of progress actually being made. So it gets a score of a 6 out of 10 from me. So there you go, 6 out of 10. And if you're not a big fan of the series, I might just say skip this one because again, you're not really going to miss anything, and they're going to do recaps for the next book in book 6. So there you go. Okay, on to our next novel. It is The Builder's Pride, The Legendary Builder, Book 3, written by J.A. Cipriano. Okay, this is 309 pages. It is $4.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. When Arthur defeated Mammon, he never expected Lucifer to awaken, and what's more, she's made Arthur an offer he can't refuse. Join her in the fight against the darkness, or face the consequences. On one hand, it's a good deal. On the other, well, it's Lucifer. Wrath has broken free. I'm sorry, worse, she's not the only one who's woken up. Wrath is broken free, envy is insane, and lust, well, lust is just looking for a big, strong man to, to death. If there's one thing Arthur's gotten good at, it's dealing with cranky archangels. There's just one problem. Heaven's about to fall, and when it does, the darkness's champion will march on hell. Guess Arthur better get his fix his sword fast. And just as this is a spoiler, he doesn't. So that's one of the issues out of the story. Okay, again, 309 pages, $4.09, available on Kindle Unlimited. There are sexual themes in the story, so be aware that remember there's kind of a harem theme in here, where all the demons and all the fallen archangels, princesses, whatever of hell, they all want to bone the main character. Like they really want to get into his pants, and so that's something that is a part of the story, and it appeals to some people, and it doesn't appeal to others. So just be aware of that going in there. But there are actual the sections are a bit more graphic here than they have been in the past. Okay. Um, Overall, this novel felt like a repetition of book two. It felt like um, there's a badass demon demon princess that arrives. The main character has to basically convince her to give him an armament and her support, and then at the very end, there's an even larger threat, and there's a cliffhanger. That's essentially what book two was in a nutshell. And book three kind of follows the same formula. It just does it multiple times with multiple demon princesses. Um, yes, the story is so funny. It's very action oriented. Um, but in a lot of ways, it felt like the same story as book two. It's just with like higher stakes at the end every single time. Also, in this particular novel, there's a lot fewer lit RPG mechanics. And I mean, there's none practically in this particular book. Remember, and this is it makes sense within the story. In book one, the main character got a sword clarion. They basically gave him like these RPG powers to upgrade anything that he owned, and that included slaves, people who worked for the buildings, the cities, etc. And so that upgrade power was essentially the RPG mechanic of the story. Everything else was essentially portal fiction. In book two, towards the end of it, the main character loses that sword, or rather, it breaks. And so, going into book three, he doesn't have that power anymore. And so, the only RPG mechanic in the entire story is gone. And so, even the main character does grow in other ways, it's not in a RPG fashion anymore. Like the only RPG like mechanic in this entire story now at this point is probably about 4 or 5 item descriptions of those armaments that the main character is trying to get to beat the bad guy, and that's it. No upgrades, no city building stuff. The rest of the novel is just regular portal fiction. And just those small mentions of those just item descriptions is not enough for this to, for me anyways, qualify as LitRPG, and that is kind of an issue. Um, and I'm sure the next book in the series, book four, will come back to it because the sword's supposed to be reforged, and that's part of the story. And so just be aware that if you're going into this novel for like that good LitRPG city building stuff or upgrade system that you had in book one and two, sort of, it does not exist here in book three. So for me, just as a general fantasy story or as a portal fiction, gives a score of 6 out of 10. Not as impressed. There are a lot of good reviews online. Other people really enjoyed it. The ending is always like a really big twist. Like it was a really good ending, and it makes you want to get the new book. But it is also again another cliffhanger. But unfortunately, this is a lit RPG podcast, and so judging this as lit RPG, it unfortunately is not. So it gets a score of 4 out of 10 for basically abandoning any lit RPG elements in the story for this particular issue. Hopefully, in book four, they come back. So there you go. Okay, on to Desert Runner, Puatera Online Book One, written by Don Chapman. Um, Here we go. Very short description from the author. An NPC story. With her pain portions in short supply, Maddie accepts a deadly run, pick up a package in Trox City, and cross the desert plains to Port Trolley. The only issue, an unwanted passenger in Tremol breeding season. So there we go. Relatively short story, 107 pages. It is $1.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Okay. There's some really good things about the story, and there's some things that just didn't click for me personally. There's not much in the way of action in this story, and it's more of a journey story than it is like an action shooter, or post-apocalyptic novel. Maddie's an NPC that's aware that she's programmed to fall in love with the visitors or players that come across into her world and into her town. When she gets a quest to take a package across the desert, she accepts it because she needs the money to buy a healing potion for herself. Yet when she gets the package, she finds that it's a visitor. And so initially she doesn't want it, and the premise is very similar to what is the setup for the transporter. Um, you think it's one thing, but turns to be a person and kind of go on a journey going through. It's just with less action, and the journey across the desert is as much for Maddie about facing dangerous obstacles as it is for her about her own internal struggles about fighting against her programming. And they're both, again, very journey oriented, in that their emotional struggles, their struggles across elements and against the monsters who are inhabiting the desert at this time of the year. And again, though, very little action in the novel. So that game mechanic wise, though, I'll touch on that first. The story is set in a kind of VR game. It's never really specified as to like the exact who makes the company, because remember, the story is told from the perspective of an NPC, a self-aware NPC, which is apparently very rare in this game. But for all intents and purposes, as far as like the main character's perspective, it's just its own post-apocalyptic world. And the game mechanics are almost entirely informational, which is not bad. Again, it's fine. Health percentages, item descriptions, and again, it doesn't mean it's not LitRPG. It just means that it's focusing on the story more than just like the game mechanics. Like the game mechanics are just they're things that exist to give you information. And from the main character's perspective, so as like a cultural relatively, that's what they should be because she exists in this game world. It's nothing that she's like planning and strategizing because she doesn't have the context of living in our world. And so for her, everything is just what it is. And the information she gets helps to inform her normal everyday decisions. So that makes total sense. It is liturgy. Um, it's just that that particular style is going to be appealing to some people and not to others. So just be aware of it. The story really solid. Really good story as far as like it being well written. Good emoting, good character descriptions, good role descriptions. It just wasn't engaging for me as much as I had hoped it would be. One is like I really wanted to like it, mostly because Don Chapman is a member of the community. She's a mod for some of the Facebook groups, and so I really wanted to go in this be amazing. But just it's just the nature of the story just doesn't appeal to me on a personal level. There's no technical issues with it. It's essentially like a big escort mission, and that in itself is not an amazing storyline, unfortunately. Um, and again, a lot of the story is about emotional development. How she feels about the world she lives in, how she feels about the other characters, the other NPCs, and how she feels about the visitor, and all that's really good and it's really well written. It's just not. I'm, like I'm a dude. I'm like it's not my thing. I'm sorry. So there you go. That's it is what it is. But there was some really good, interesting sci-fi speculation about what it would be like to be an NPC in the game world and know you're an NPC. So there's some really interesting, um, like speculative thought processes from the perspective of Maddie, which I really did like. But overall, it's just it wasn't quite what what was good for me, but it is going to appeal to a lot of other readers. So there you go. For me, though, we get the score of 6 out of 10. So it was really close to being good. It's just like a lot of emotioning. Is that a word? Like emoting, I guess. So there you go. Okay, 6 out of 10. Okay, next story. Okay, Nova Sky, Titan Rising. This one is written by Casey Song. There you go. It is 206 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I'll read you the author's description. The Great Flood swept across the globe, sinking all of Earth's land masses deep underwater and leaving the last of humanity surviving on floating domed cities. Unsure when the waters would ever recede, the last remaining populace found themselves trapped with little hope of leaving their floating cities for dry land in their lifetimes. To bring a sense of purpose, hope, and the need to be free, the domed city government created a virtual space exploration game called Nova Sky. In the digital universe, the last remaining people of Earth can explore, build, and live their lives in a simulated, massive multiplayer game, no longer confined in their floating domes. Evan Ward is a sixth generation child of the Oak Dome City. His existence outside of the game are only small moments in a city he has known all of his life. But in the game Nova Sky, he's an engineer of a particular talent and a proud member of the Azure Guild. Along with his family, they try to help those in Nova Sky who cannot help themselves. Okay, I'm gonna skip that. When a strange discovery tips the balance of power in the guild, Evan must choose sides for the sake of family and those who will be crushed by the power shift. With a small band of renegade guildmates fighting for their lives, Evan joins them to hunt down Titans so we can help restore balance to the guild. That's what it says. The player will have his loyalty and his skills tested if he is to survive Nova Sky. So wow, that's a good one. Okay. Basically, this is a very nice sci-fi story. There is a genuine attempt at the beginning of the novel, like the first 2% of it, to make this little RPG. Like there was mention of levels, XP, class skills, and that the game and the story is set in a game. There was even like a full-on 4% of the novel between the 16 and 20% of it, um, that takes place in the real world, and it gives you backstory about the world itself, how it went to Heck and Handbasket, um, the character's backstory, and why people play this game so much. And it's really well done. I really did enjoy it. And however, while it's well written, um, that section of the real world really only exists to justify to say that the rest of the story is in the game. Um, and after that 20% mark, you never ever return to the world ever again. Like everything before the 16% mark in game, 20% mark. Sorry, yeah. So before and after that 16 to 20% mark, it's everything's in the game. So the murder story, like 96% of it is just in the game. And unfortunately, most of the story presents as really a straight up space action sci-fi story, and that's not bad. It is just not an RPG. Like if you were legitimately going to just like extract that 4% of real world section, I really doubt that most readers would ever be able to tell that this is supposed to be set in a game. It would really just read like space sci-fi. And again, it is what it is. It's just that there are no real game mechanics in the story. After that 3% mark, there's almost no mention of any game things, but there are no legitimate game mechanics in the story. There are a few game words that are used, and they're used appropriately, but there are no real game mechanics. Um, and again, they're just little reminders here and there saying, "Oh, that person's an NPC or that's a player," and that's kind of it. So it is unfortunate. Even the levels and XP mentioned in that first 3% of the novel, they don't actually come up again. Like literally, no one levels in like most of this novel. At the 77% mark, one person gains like 3 levels, and then after like literally killing dozens and hundreds of people and monsters and machines and whatever, one person levels at that point, and it doesn't actually mean anything. It's almost a side note in the story. And the character doesn't change, it doesn't upgrade skills or anything like that. It is just like, oh, I feel like the writer's like, oh, a lot of stuff has happened. I should probably make this for 70 levels at this point. And it feels inserted in that way. And again, it's the story is good. Like I genuinely like this story as a sci-fi story. There's good world building. The theme and feel of the book really does remind me of Mass Effect, and that kind of sci-fi alien world with advanced spaceships. There's cool action. There's lots of space battles and fights, and it's futuristic sci-fi stuff. It's a very action-oriented story, which again I appreciate. And the story is quick pace and it's very interesting, but it isn't a little RPG. Again, there are no game mechanics, much less RPG mechanics in the story that are there. So as a sci-fi story, it would easily get like 7 out of 10. Like it's a good sci-fi story. But as lit RPG, which it is advertised on Facebook as, it gets a 4 out of 10, and that's just because the author promoted it in the Facebook literature groups as LitRPG. Wasn't promoted as just, oh, this is a cool sci-fi story that I wrote. And so that's what I'm judging it as. So it gets a score of 4 out of 10 as a LitRPG story. So there you go. Okay, next story. It is Shadow of the Rogue, a LitRPG fantasy adventure hearts book 1, written by Quinn Dallas. Okay, this one is 229 pages, $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. Life in 2036 sucks. Hi, my name is Casey James. I live with my parents in what's left of Seattle. For a 20-year-old girl, I'm pretty typical. To pay for my gaming habit, I work at a local supermarket. While the job is really tedious, it's better than unemployment. Most nights you can find me plugged in. That's when I can get a moment of peace from my parents' drunken bickering. Still, my life was fairly boring until I decided to try Odyssey Online. I'm super addicted to leveling Kara Knight with my Shadow Thief. However, something's gone terribly wrong. You see, an epic level NPC has grown self aware, and Grime is not a dragon to be trifled with. He is a mind napped over 500 people, leaving them trapped in the game. He's also launched a massive offensive to take over Odyssey Online, one kingdom at a time. The only way to stop him is to locate three legendary items, each one containing an unlock that makes us players more powerful. The problem being, Grime has agents everywhere, and they are willing to do anything to win. If that weren't enough, I'm developing a serious girl crush on Shauna, a very cute elf healer, with help of Leonidas, the paladin, Karagorn the wizard, and Yaver the barbarian. We might just defeat Grime and win our freedom. So there you go. This is again like 229 pages, $2.09, available on Kindle Unlimited. There is a brief lesbian sex scene at the 67 to 68% mark. It's not graphic, but it does exist, and those same-sex relationships are not everybody's cup of tea. So just be aware of that before you consider reading this. The first 1% of the novel, which is the real world storyline, is probably the most interesting portion of this novel. It's also the most original. The main character, again, Cassie, 20 years old, is a gamer in the year 2036, and that world that's set up there in that first 1% of the novel is genuinely interesting. It's described as a world that's going increasingly automated, which is a reflection of our own world, and how unemployment among many people is super high, so much so that many people are already on government programs where they get income every month from the government. I forget the technical word. I think it's something from another country. But Casey's happy. I mean, she's lucky, I should say, then that she has a job that she's able to use to support her expensive gaming habits. And she, like many other people in this world, use full immersion of virtual reality as an escapism to live in another world. So that is an interesting world to set up the story in. Then at the 2% mark, you get into the actual game. So that's a very quick turnaround. And it's here that you can kind of tell that things aren't as well developed. I'll put it that way. Just starting with character creation. At the 2% mark, the main character jumps into the game, and character creation is kind of a mess as far as the author describes it. There's one like detailed description about the dwarven race as an option for a character race, and then it sort of just casually mentions that there are other words like elves, humans, or whatever. But you get no further descriptions. And that I thought that was kind of weird. Then the main character just decides to be human, and instead of like going through like class options like warrior, paladin, I mean, like thief, mage, whatever the case is, instead of like actually describing them as the author did with like the one dwarven race, the main character decides, oh, well, I'll use my Puatera class, which is the shadow thief, and the text just kind of ignores that there are other classes possible. And so I mean, that's a choice. And then the story literally just skips to when the main character is level 8. So she goes from character creation to level 8, and there's no in between description. It's literally a couple sentences saying, "Oh, I went through training, the tutorial training. I'm level 8 now." And that's kind of what it says. It's literally a couple sentences. And so the game story then starts out with the level 8, trying to finish her last training quest in a maze. And it's decent. It's a decently written section. But just that first beginning kind of gives you an indicator that um, the game stuff in this novel is not going to be very thorough, and it's not going to be very detailed or consistent. And that is the case for most of the story, unfortunately. Um, by the 9% mark of the story, there's like a brief period where the main character logs out and logs back in, and there's a little bit more of like it's just an excuse to kind of make the main character log back in. So at the 9% mark, she logs back in. She finds that she's trapped in the game, and from here on, the story gets really paint by numbers. Like I could when I'm reading this, I kept saying to myself, "Are you really going with that route of the story of a premise?" And just like predicting what's going to happen in every element of the story. Um, it kind of loses that originality that the world kind of had, that feel of like, oh, this is an original concept story. It just felt like somebody read a bunch of LitRPG, and took, oh, this is a successful idea, this is an idea, this is an idea, and kind of mushed them all together into this story, even just in the premise. And so I didn't have a really good time with it. For example, not only is the main character trapped in the game, there's also a permadeath aspect to it. Like if she dies in the game, she dies in real life. The rural teen, it is turned on as well. Um, she's saved by a paladin who just happens to introduce her to a group of, of, of a suspiciously well balanced group of other players who happen to know about a secret emergency exit option that was in the beta program, apparently. Um, and then, now this part is a little spoiler. The emergency exit option turns out to be that they have to go through a really hard quest line and collect some items, and then defeat like a really hard bad guy. And like that seems like a horrible emergency exit option when I'm reading this. So that's what I'm thinking to myself. Because I'm like, why would you have an emergency exit option so difficult? Why not just make it like some keyword or key phrase that people would have to say, like or a specific string of words or whatever, instead of making it so challenging that doesn't make sense even like logic wise. Um, but it's also a premise that I've seen in other novels, like specifically like other recent novels. And so again, like I said, I'm not saying the author is picking and choosing necessarily, but it kind of felt that way. Like I said, the author just read a bunch of little bitty stuff and like, oh, I like that idea, that one, and just squash them together for the novel. Um, so for me, like I said, felt very paint by numbers for me. Um, the RPG mechanics again aren't very thorough, and that's another issue with the story that I kind of had. Um, if you're going to write a literature story and you're going to have like game mechanics in it, make them consistent, please. Like I said, I'm not saying that they don't exist in the story. This is a literature story. It's an existing game world. People progress by those RPG mechanics in the story that are very openly stated. Everybody knows about it. So it is lit RPG, and there are RPG mechanics throughout the entire story. It's not like they don't exist anymore. It's just that they're not always consistent, and it very much feels like during when I'm reading the story, I feel like the author decided at some point, I have a story to tell, and if these game mechanics get in the way, I'm just going to ignore them. And that to me it kind of bothers me because when you set up world rules, whether they're RPG mechanics or not, like I always feel like as a reader, if you don't follow those rules, what's the point of having them? And I'll give you a couple instances. Um, one early in the novel, the main character um, is trapped in a player versus player situation. So where she dies, she's attacked. If she dies in the game, she'll die in real life, right? She doesn't know this yet. This is very early in the novel. However, when she uses a new ability to insta kill a high level player. And she does it for like 835 points of damage. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of damage. Especially like a few pages before her max damage was 50. So I'm like, I'm not sure if that's just a typo. But it's also an ability she didn't have literally a couple pages ago. Um, and so that's just one example of like, oh, the main character can't die here. So the author just kind of inserted some non supported game mechanic just to kind of get the player along. And this happens again later on in the story where she's escaping from a dungeon and she hits a guard with an elbow to the head, knocking him out instantly, instead of like starting a combat scene. And again, there's no justification for this occurring. She doesn't have an unarmed combat skill or non-lethal skill set in her character build, and it feels like those things were just added for that instance because that's what the story kind of needed for it to progress. And I'm not saying it doesn't make logical sense for sort of like an author's point of view. I'm just saying as a reader, I'm like you set game rules, you've established these rules, and it's you break them at your convenience for the sake of advancing the story, just getting your characters out of a tricky situation instead of like creating more logic based systems, and that just kind of bother me. Just as a reader. Additionally, the game mechanics in the story, the formatting kind of sucks. I'll show you right here. Everything as far as the game mechanics go is in capital letters. And it felt like as I'm reading the story, it felt like the novel was yelling at me all the time because everything is in caps. So if there's something like this is a real poll, a bleeding dot has been applied to you. Your stealth has been deactivated. It really did feel like the novel was yelling at me all the time because of the formatting. And that was just a small thing that bugged me, but it is a legitimate thing. So for me, overall, just because of the sort of mediocre, predictable story and the inconsistent game mechanics, it wasn't a great read for me. It was kind of meh. It wasn't bad necessarily. It's just that so many things dropped this down for me. Other people I enjoyed, and I'm cool with that. But for me, it gets a score of 5 out of 10. So there you go. Shadow of the Rogue gets a 5 out of 10. Okay, and that is it, ladies and gentlemen. We are all finished. Thank you very much for listening. To me talk about the news and the community and this thing that I love. You can follow the podcast on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Patreon. If you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, remember to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. There's tons of ways you can do so, including just like sharing this video on Facebook or on Twitter. That says like, oh, this is a cool thing. Check it out. That always helps get us new eyeballs. So again, thanks for hanging out with me. Until we can hang out again, remember to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.